Winsford. Who went upstairs?
Dina and Tobin.
Okay, so anything up there that we should know about?
A lot of space. There's some big gymnastics thingies in the middle of the room, and Dina's excited. Some old files and such. So, a lot of square footage up there.
We're back on? Okay. So thank you all for coming back into order. Thank Otto for the tour. Windspirit was mentioning that he went upstairs and how much square footage there is up there, and I guess in previous times, and I just learned, I guess it was Mark that said that you taught up in that classroom upstairs.
I did. Some of my stuff still.
But you know, if we were to need to expand and use that on a full-time basis, we'd probably have to make it ADA compliant, the access to it. So that's another thing. You know, there might be a major structural issue if we were to get that capacity. Okay, so we'll move on to 8.3, which is discussion of a memorandum of understanding between the Mendocino Unified School District and the Fort Bragg Unified School District regarding district of choice. Jason, do you want to introduce this?
Sure. So this came out of a meeting with Becky Walker, superintendent in Fort Bragg, and we talked about the fact that based on current ed code, Fort Bragg is currently over the 3% threshold or the 10% threshold, 3% for the current year of number of students coming from Fort Bragg to Mendocino. Or, of course, the 10%, which is for the lifetime of the program, and we're well over 10% of Fort Bragg's in ADA. So we got together and we just talked about the fact that we both really like what's happening now. We like the fact that Fort Bragg students are able to come to Mendocino if we have room. And we don't get a lot of money for Fort Bragg students coming to our district, but we get a little bit, so a little bit helps. Currently, we have 74 students coming from Fort Bragg. However, currently we have about 14. We have 60 that have signed up, that Fort Bragg has signed off on. So I've discovered that 14 families live in Fort Bragg that attend Mendocino, and so those are high school students. And Fort Bragg has always said that they would sign off on those if they fill out the form. So hopefully they are in the process of filling out the signing off that paperwork. They're meeting tonight in Fort Bragg. So that would bring us up to 74. We have 17 transfer students from Point Arena. We don't get any money from Point Arena students because they are basic aid. And then we have 9 from Anderson Valley. So we have exactly 100 students coming into our district from district of choice, almost 20%. So so Fort Bragg could essentially say no to all students that want to come to Mendocino. And we have not accepted K-8 transfers for a couple of years now, except a couple. There was one inter-district kindergartner that was accepted this year, one 5th grader, and one kindergarten for intra-district. So we just don't have the room K-5. Our class sizes have ballooned up to 29 in some grades, and so we would, however, still like the option for families to apply, and if there happens to be room in our classrooms, then we can look at that. So this would allow us to get together with Fort Bragg and set a threshold. And right now the number that's being thrown out there by Fort Bragg is somewhere in the 50s, like 50 or 54. So the agreement going forward would be that we would meet every year. I love that there's a yearly meeting. It just keeps that communication going. And determine a number that Fort Bragg would be willing to live with. So, for instance, if we have 74 right now from Fort Bragg, they're willing to their threshold is 54. They would not accept or they wouldn't sign off on any transfer students until we got below 54 from Fort Bragg. I think that's a reasonable number, since that is 3% of their enrollment. I do also like in here that the fact that number 4 says that we could have an inter-district transfer process. So under extraordinary circumstances, some pupils can be allowed for inter-district. That might mean we might not get any money for them, but I bet we could probably claim them for district of choice. I'm not sure, I can look into that. For students who move to Fort Bragg during their 11th or 12th grade years, or other unique situations. So I do like those two parts of this. So I think this is a good MOU. I think it's a working document, and just wonder if the board has any questions about it.
The question I have is if there's an offset of, if let's say we have students that are going to Fort Bragg, does that change the numbers at all?
No, I threw that out there, that should we consider that? We have 36 students who live in Mendocino who go to Fort Bragg, so that net could be a little lower. That's not how it works if you're district of choice, but they are aware of that, and I've made sure that the board at Fort Bragg is aware that we do have 36 students, and they get full funding for
That's
those
what I was going
students.
to ask, because it's not like our situation with Point Arena, we're basic aid, but because they're not, they get full funding.
Right,
Okay.
right. So
So that was discussed, or you didn't, I mean.
it was
not that you
discussed, I
didn't-
made them aware of it,
Okay.
and it was included in the document that she provided to the board, that Becky provided to her board. So I don't think it's gonna be, it's a factor, I think, but
Mhm. And then the other question was, you know, with us maybe having different strengths of specific programs, you know, whether music or
Comp School
whatever,
or-
yeah. So is there any allowance both directions? You know, our
Right.
students may be wanting to be on a football team or, you know, that
Right.
kind of thing. So is that in the mix at all?
I could bring that up again and say maybe going forward we could essentially do, you know, if we're gonna have 3 go there, then you could maybe send 3 our way. It's still up. We've never said no to a transfer to Fort Bragg. Just 'cause it just isn't in our best interest to have a student here that doesn't wanna be here.
Yeah, I'm thinking of, you know, if we, given our numbers are so low at Fort Bragg, we have small districts, but, you know, a student that genuinely has a specific desire and, you know, there's a strength going to one school or the other, if that is something, you know, we can at least give that as a consideration to a
Right.
student who actually needs the program.
Right, because we typically have openings at the high school
Mhm.
on a year-to-year basis. It's the K-5 where we're full.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So do we need to adopt this or just?
We do. We need to approve or ratify this MOU before it goes into effect.
And if you'd like, we could, just an option, I know Fort Bragg's talking about it, so they may come back, Becky might contact me tomorrow, because we're meeting tomorrow, and say, well, our board felt this or this needed a change, so I could bring it back in November, I mean, this is your first look at it. We could adopt it as is, but if there are any changes that she comes back with, I might have to bring it back. So it's up to you.
Either way.
I think we should go ahead and take a vote now, and if they don't make changes, and if they make changes in the minor, we can just put it on the consent calendar.
Sure.
Nothing
good.
private.
Okay.
So would someone make a motion to approve this memorandum of understanding with Fort Bragg Unified?
I move to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second, moved and seconded. Remy? Okay, everybody else, aye?
Alright.
Any noes? Okay, it's been approved.
And I want to thank Jason for having these types of communications. I think it's really a great thing to have in place.
Yeah, I think the relationship between the two districts is really, it's really good.
It's wonderful.
Right now.
It's all good things from there.
And also all the work you put into researching this over the summer.
Right?
Okay, I think we can probably get this in before parent community comment. 8.4, in our contract with the teachers, we have to declare by November 15th whether certificated employees will be offered the reduced work load retirement option for the following year. We've successfully done this for many years. I think there was one year where we didn't create the option. What is the recommendation this year?
I would recommend that we open it up and we have to make that decision by February 1st.
Right, so we make the decision
No,
today.
they apply by February 1st.
First,
We make the decision at the February board meeting.
Right.
Right.
So, this year we have 4 or 5 people on reduced workload?
Well, those are actually
A job sharing, they're not.
a job
they're
sharing
not part
or
of this.
maternity, so nobody is under.
Right,
doing
nobody's,
this.
okay. All right, any questions? So I'll entertain a motion to approve offering the reduced workload option for next year.
I so move.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Remy? Okay.
You did that backwards.
I did that backwards. You know, the new state law says that you have to ask the student trustee first before everybody else votes. Okay, so it's 6 o'clock. This is when we have parent community comment. Anybody who wants to speak on items not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of this body may address us at this time, and there's a whole lot of other formal language there that I'm not going to read, but if there's anybody who would like to speak. Dina.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about the emergency preparedness work that's going on in Comptche, because I know that the district has been working on some kind of emergency plans, and I want to be sure that we're all on the same page. So I'm thinking, I'm going to give you this copy of this letter that went out. You've already got one. You want another one? You can have it. This is a letter that went out to our community describing what we're doing with emergency preparedness. And it just occurred to me that you guys might want to know about it. And the other thing I'm hoping, and I spoke last year a little bit to Kim and a little bit to Jason about it, is just including in our plans this building, our designated shelter for the community. It's on the Red Cross list, is the Chapel of the Redwoods, and last year the community got a grant from the Community Foundation to put in a generator. So that building has a generator. We've just gotten some cots, and we're fundraising and organizing to get supplies. So if in the event that things really go south and roads are cut off and trees are down and nobody can get out, and kind of scenarios that you don't even want to think about, we just want to be prepared. And we would like to easily have, of course we can find access to it, but just have some kind of a communication beforehand with the school of what's appropriate. The fire department, of course, the Comptche Fire Department is in charge of the whole,
I think you were in a different room when we were talking about this earlier tonight.
Missed it.
And we were talking about it in relation to the fact that one of the identified needs for this building is perhaps, a permanent standby generator.
Right.
Which would then make it much more useful in a community emergency.
Precisely, because, there are computers here and communications here, not that they would work even if we had power, but, you never know. So, looking at the community resources, this is one part of the community that we would like to be part of the whole disaster preparedness plan. And I don't know where we go from here talking about it or doing it, but certainly a generator.
So I think that Otto identified himself, and I know Jason also would probably be the people you would liaise with, and perhaps, even formally requesting a key, for example.
Yep.
That kind of thing, and follow through on that.
Right, in the hands of the fire department or
Right.
whatever, or at our designated,
Right.
somewhere at the church, so that it could be used in case of emergency.
Dina, I have a question. So, was there or what was the impact last year when the road to Ukiah was out? Did you feel it? How did the
People in the Ore Springs Valley certainly struggled. You know, it was very difficult.
So did that give you a bit of a, not the same impact, but did it give you any kind of thoughts on, you know, what will happen in the event of
Yes.
being cut off?
And we've been in contact with, this group we've been in contact with the other coastal emergency groups, with Casper, with ELK, with the county services, with the Red Cross, you know, where everybody talks about, well, what if or what could be, and the bottom line is whatever you plan for is not going to be what it is, and we're just trying to figure out without going crazy or overboard what makes the most sense to keep in Comptche. You know, there's always questions of would you have people here, or would you try to evacuate people to somewhere else? And of course, it would depend on the condition of the roads or the condition of the last thing that happened at our emergency preparedness meeting last week was we're buying trauma bags that are going to be kept at our shelter, even though the fire department has it when they're out on their fire calls. They've got their supplies, and there's still supplies at the shelter in case we needed to be working. So everything's coordinated, but we're talking about what we want to stock right there at the shelter as well. We have 30 cots, no blankets, but.
It's important to note that our working assumption here in emergency preparedness is that if there was a region-wide earthquake or fire, that Comptche would be a low priority. So we're trying to be prepared to stand alone for 2 weeks at least.
Oh.
And handle injuries and homeless people and also people evacuated from other places. That's our working assumption on the emergency preparedness.
Oh, that's great.
We look forward to good cooperation with the school and this facility as part of that plan.
School would be valuable.
Are Albion and/or ELK designated emergency sites or not?
I believe so. I haven't heard that they were.
But
Should be.
the K-8 is, right?
K-8 is.
I think the Elk community is about as far along as Comptche, you know, in terms of their community organization. They've had several meetings, but I think they're basing out of their community center, which is
Right.
not.
They've been at it way longer. They have, we learned a lot from how they stocked their emergency trailer and what they've been doing, and they've been at it for a couple of years, doing a really good job in that community.
And Albion is not, or?
I have not heard as much from Albion. I know Casper's pretty well organized, but, you know, I've not really heard about what Albion's doing.
Albion Little River started the whole craze of green reflective signs.
That's true.
They were really good at that, and that's very important for first responders, that addresses are easy to see through bad conditions, smoky conditions, night conditions, all these things, and not wanting, you know, for people not to get the help they need because their place isn't identified. So they started a really big push on that about a year and a half ago, and lots of other communities have jumped on that as well.
So did anybody else have a parent community comment that they would like to make at this time? Jess? Yes, but we would like you to use the microphone so that the people in the outer YouTube world will hear what you're saying.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jez Anderson. I am a parent of 2 children that attend the Mendocino schools, kindergartner and a 7th grader. I'm an alumni of the Mendocino schools. One of the schools that I attended was the Comptche 2-room schoolhouse when it was around the corner. Got many fond memories of Comptche. It's good to be back. The reason I came today was I'm continue to be very concerned about the situation with our school and its open door policy towards police on campus. I spoke at the last school board meeting and expressed my concern about showing up to school on the first day and there being an officer there roaming the campus freely. So I came to the board meeting and the very next day, I went to school, and there was not one officer, but there were two. So before that, I'd only ever seen one. But the actual day after, the morning after I left here, left Mendocino, the very next morning, there were two officers, and they were there for longer. They were there from before school started, and I sat there and I talked to Kim and observed what they were doing. They were there till close to 9 o'clock in the morning, so there for almost an hour. One point, standing up with their backs up against a wall, just kind of observing everybody. And at another point coming into the campus, they were both fully armed. Since then, I have seen multiple other times, I've seen officers on campus. I've seen them enter from multiple directions. So coming in from one side, coming in from another side. I've seen them park in multiple different locations, both in the very limited visitor parking and also in the yellow zone, in 2 areas of the yellow zone where parents are not allowed to park. I was trying to believe that we were communicating and that there was a plan. I went to the school safety meeting. I was very grateful for the people that went, and I definitely listened and spoke my piece. And then there was the day that I came to school, and I parked in, once again, in the parent parking area, and walked my kindergarten son to his class, and then the closer and closer we got, the more obvious it was that there was an officer walking into his classroom. So he's a kindergartner, and Officer Van Warmer is his name, and he was in my son's kindergarten class. I observed them there for 10 minutes. I stood there, maybe 8 minutes to be honest. I stood there and watched him. And he had apparently, and I also talked to his, my son's teacher and the aide, about the situation, and I was told that this officer has taking a fancy to picking apples from his yard and bringing them in this bucket to the kindergarten. And the way that the fingers were being pointed, my understanding was the kindergarten and the first grade, maybe even the second grade, and giving these apples out to kids, and then at some point he would come back and retrieve his bucket, get more apples, and come back in. So this was his entree to come into the classes on a regular basis. So my question, and why I'm here, and the same question I asked Kim this morning as I directly communicated with her about this, is there any, bottom? Is there any limit, right? I was under the impression that we'd have a officer on campus occasionally. Now I would say it's very regularly, almost weekly. I was told that, they wouldn't be in classes. Now, who told me they weren't going to be in the classes? I believe that came up in a conversation. I'm not going to quote on who said that. My understanding from a conversation with the administrators was they were not going to be in the classrooms. But now apparently that's not the case. I received no notice that my son was regularly interacting with this officer. I asked him about it, a little kindergartner, and oh yeah, he sees him a lot. What is a lot to a kindergartner, I don't know. But I'm very concerned that there's no limit here. If you don't have a policy and you don't have any guidelines and there are no limits, what essentially you have is an open door policy for officers to come to the campus at any point they want, to stay as long as they want, to enter from any access point, to not check in at the office, to not carry a school badge showing that they signed in like I do. By virtue of being officers, I'm being told that all they have to do is ask. Because I was told there was no policy, they just asked. And now they've just asked if they can deliver apples to my son's classroom. And now they've just asked if they can have 2 officers there. I don't think they actually asked if they could have 2 officers. So, they don't even have to ask anymore? To me, this seems a little out of the ordinary, extraordinary, unusual, concerning. These officers are fully armed, and my little kindergarten's head comes up to right about where the gun is, and this officer is in a classroom. There's 27 kids in that classroom, 27 kindergartners in that classroom surrounding, checking in, going around, moving around, and he's just there in the middle of them all. And that's not unusual? That's not a problem? It is for me. So I will continue to be at the school safety committee meeting. I want to say that there are a lot of people who are privately expressing concerns to me that do not feel comfortable in being here. I won't speak for them, I'll speak for myself, but I will tell you that there are many people who are very concerned about what's happening. It's one thing that every single day you drop off your kid, there's an officer on the outside of campus. That's fine, we'll all slow down, we'll all be extra safe, that's great. But now they've essentially just welcomed themselves in. That is excessive. That is out of line. I've had several people tell me, well, if you're so concerned about it, call the sheriff's office. I used to work within the world of youth development and anti-gang and anti-bullying and all of that. So I do know Allman, I've met him and we know each other, probably would recognize my name. And I do, if it comes down to it, I do plan on calling him, but I'm more inclined to first call the other numbers I've been given, like for the ACLU and private attorneys, because I'd like to know if this is legitimate. So I'm not comfortable just like having a conversation with Allman and just being told that this is normal. I want to know if this really is normal, because this does not seem normal to me. So I will continue to go to the school safety meeting. I'll continue to speak out. I work at I live at the end of Navarro Ridge. I work in Fort Bragg. I'm a single parent, and I made it to this meeting, and that's a miracle. And I'll keep coming back until I feel like you've really heard me. Thank you.
May I add something to this? I didn't come prepared to speak about this. I didn't come prepared to speak about this, but I was at last month's meeting. There's a sensitivity issue here that I think everyone's missing. I went and looked up the demographics of it, and if you look at police trust in the United States, what it does is it breaks down by racial groups. Whites trust police about 70% of the time. Blacks trust police only 30% of the time, and Hispanics somewhere in the middle. So one of the things you have to recognize is that when you have a uniformed officer on campus, that fully half of the minority students don't see a protector, they see an oppressor. Now, I'm white, but I've had plenty of run-ins with police. So I treat them like an unknown dog, that usually is benign, but could hurt you. My kids are friends with families where one member of the family has an, shall we say, ambiguous immigration status. So they're scared when uniformed policemen are on campus. It seems to me that you have an opportunity here for the sheriff to do an outreach to let the kids know exactly what these officers can and can't do legally while they're on the campus. Build up trust. Show the minority students at Mendocino that these police officers aren't to be feared. This is an opportunity. Now, and you have to take this seriously, because I know the minority students have an issue with uniforms on campus. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Is there anybody else who wanted to speak on this or any other issue? Any comment that anybody on the board wants to make at this time?
I have quite a few thoughts about this. I'm thinking we should agendize this for next month. I forgot, I was actually hoping we did it this month, because I think it warrants a more in-depth discussion.
Okay.
I think it does too, but I wonder about process in terms of the safety committee and us agendizing it. So that's a question I have is, do we need to let the safety committee do more work before we agendize it, or agendize it now? It's an open question. I'd like to hear from Jason what he thinks.
I think the safety committee we spent a good 45 minutes discussing it at the last committee meeting. I'd like to get the sheriff's department to our board meeting and kind of they can explain what their purpose is for coming to our campus. So I think that if we do have it on the agenda, I would love to invite either the lieutenant here on the coast or Sheriff Allman to come.
Right. And if I remember correctly, I might not, but at our last meeting, I think we all kind of seemed to understand or hope that, or understand that the safety committee was kind of going to start gathering input from the parents and from our community as a whole, and come back to us with where they're at. So could the safety committee have a say in on the next time
Why?
that we discuss this?
Sure, I mean, there's only, let's see, at the last committee meeting, I believe we had 3 staff members and 3 parents.
Right.
So it's not a big representation of,
Mm-hmm.
of opinion,
Okay.
so I don't know.
Well,
I
we
mean,
need to talk about what our policy, our policy is gonna be, our stance on law enforcement. A couple of issues came up last time, the idea of what actual equipment is the officer wearing? Is he trained to use that equipment around kids, and a number of other things. So at some point, we need to
See, I think
decide
that's
where our stance is.
Well, I think that's, I can't answer that, and the people that can answer that are is the sheriff's department. You know, what kind of equipment they have and what
Right.
kind of training they have. I mean, I did email the board all the training that they do have, but I would love to bring them on.
Right.
It's not my area of expertise.
Do you think it pays to have a parent night, hopefully well attended, where they can come and share with parents maybe that aren't intimidated by a board meeting, that parents, not in this kind of
To
setting.
have them there.
Yeah, have a parent night and,
Yeah.
understand their presence or their goals.
Sure. I mean, we could do both, or a board meeting, because I want you to have it.
Yeah, I
Be a part
definitely
of the
like
discussion
a
as
board
well,
meeting,
yeah.
but, maybe, parents, could ask questions without being in the formal setting
Sure.
of the meeting.
Do you think that should happen before our next board meeting, or?
Well, I wonder if they would come in with a different perspective of what they share, if they have some community input.
So
So,
before the board meeting?
I would say
Ideally.
before, but I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts around that. But maybe if they see where the parents are coming from, they'll have a better idea of how to
Sure.
present at a meeting.
Sure. I can try and set that up, for sure.
How does that sound? Do you think parents would feel a little more comfortable in that situation?
I'm not exactly clear I think what I'm hearing you say is that the idea would be to invite parents and the police at the same time.
Mhm.
I don't think that is liable to really get, it's October
Mm-hmm.
in a year where we are experiencing a move from prohibition to a new law, which is not clearly defined, and there are a lot of folks who are in transition, who are in the agricultural industry in this community, not to mention that we're going into the winter and getting people into an evening event in general is hard. So I guess I'd just leave it up to you, and I trust your judgment, but I guess I would just be like, if people don't show up to that meeting, will you take that to mean they don't care? Because a more secure way to know that would be to offer some sort of a survey monkey or some sort of a survey of parents, where that would be an anonymous survey that could be provided to parents. Because I think that the primary issue of why you're having me here instead of the multiple people who thanked me for being here, to be quite honest, is because I don't really have anything to lose.
I'm thinking more of a question and answer, which would be not really a survey type of situation. But I hear it, you're saying that as far as it reflecting poor attendance, having some greater meeting in our district, we have very low expectations of attendance. People are busy. And so if that wouldn't, in my opinion, that wouldn't in any way represent that it's not an important subject.
I think the idea, Jess, is we, of course, take very seriously the idea of police being on the campus and whether they should be there, whether they shouldn't, how they should be equipped, what the protocol is, et cetera. All that needs to be discussed. And the idea that Jessica brought up of having this meeting was so that we could make sure that not only we come up with ideas on what needs to get done, but we get ideas from you. So if there's a parent who isn't comfortable coming to a meeting, if they provide you the ideas are what we're looking for. We're not looking to see if there's enough people interested for us to take this up.
If I had parents who were comfortable like writing a statement and signing it so you know that they're really a person, if that would be helpful in case they weren't able to bring that might be another option too.
I don't think we're questioning the validity that parents are concerned, so don't take that pressure upon yourself, in my opinion. But maybe if they could make statements so that you can have it, you know, more personal, you know, per person of what they'd like to share. But you don't, I don't want you to feel, I don't know, board feels, I don't feel like you need to prove that there's a concern.
For me, it's more a list of questions and concerns than a statement.
Exactly.
We need to know what all the concerns are, and so a meeting was one way, but if you came together with a numbered list of questions and concerns, then we could address those in a meeting with the police department.
Exactly.
I certainly have a concern about access to the gun in the holster, and I would like a policeman to come and explain how a 7-year-old can't get the gun out of his holster. That's simply where my head is. On the other hand, I very much support having police on campus as a matter of building community and trust, but I want it to be done safely. And another concern for me is to make sure they're able to explain how they deal with immigration issues. I think I know. I think they're not allowed to be part of that, but I may be misinformed.
Well, you've gotta let the students know, because all the
Yeah,
students
right.
see is a uniform.
Right.
And, you know, a nice uniform looks like a cop. So you've got, it's the
Yeah.
kids that have to be made aware.
Right.
That's where the outreach and the education has to occur.
So, for me, I think there's like a huge difference between an officer and just being there and being present. I don't know if you ever have officers come in and do like a presentation to the kids, but I think that would be a good way to kind of bridge the gap. Because like you said, like we need the kids to understand that they're not a threat. So having like a direct line of communication between them and the kids instead of just the kids just being like watched and observed, be able to have the kids be able to ask questions.
Yeah, so that's a great idea that you brought up, that if a kid's scared and he sees he's scared of an officer, he's likely not going to go up and talk to the officer to understand him better. But if we can help there be a bridge, then the kid knows, okay, if I'm in a dangerous situation and I need help, I can go to this person. So that's a good idea.
And yeah, we were at our ASB, we were bringing up the possibility of doing something like that at the high school, and hasn't been talked about much more, but I can bring it up again for that to be a possibility to happen at our school.
The one thing I did note about the safety committee is that there was not a single representative there of a parent of a high schooler. Everybody there that were parents, all of us had younger kids. And I just thought that I find that there's a lot of attention right now from the sheriff's office on our K-8. I don't know, I don't spend time with high school, but I don't know if they're there, you know, constantly as well, just walking around the campus. But I feel like a little peculiarly kind of like it's turned around, like instead of like the high school where the older kids who may have more access to things that would be problematic on a campus, you know, we're talking about kindergartners, you know, that's who they're observing, and they are observing, definitely. And in particular staring at the middle school age youth. So I don't get it, and so I would like to see in this conversation, in this whatever, that we kind of look to some clarification of where the high school stands in this, and if they are being included in this, and where is Divvy's leadership, because I've raised to the safe schools, I've raised to the superintendent, to the principal, and also to the school safety committee, that I feel like there is a lack of youth engagement and leadership in this whole process, and that youth were very deeply impacted by school violence, and that there was a point where they were wanting to march, and there was some that marched, and then some that went to school. And anyways, the point being that like, I would think that they would be invited to be a part of the solution. And the other issue, and I'll stop now, is that what I keep raising, when I raise the school safety committee, what I still have not received any answers on, is what is the perception that there is a problem? Because my understanding is that there's a perceived problem and we're addressing it. And I've gone round and round about what that might be. One of the perceived problems explained to me is that we perceive that kids don't feel comfortable around cops. And we want them to feel more comfortable around cops. So if they need help, they can go to help. That's been explained to me by administrators and also by parents. But when I asked straight out one of the administrators at that meeting, so that's your decision that you feel there's a problem, I was like, no, that's not a perceived problem. We don't perceive that as a problem at all.
Okay,
There's no
Jess,
problem at all.
Jess, I'm
There
gonna
is
stop
no
you,
problem.
just because we want to move on.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
But I think it's clear that we will agendize it.
I appreciate
You
it.
know, I'm not sure it'll be November but we'll see what we can do to get, you know, someone important from the sheriff to be there as well, and we'll see, you know, I would certainly like to see, perhaps Susan can research what kind of policies may exist for, you know, armed presence on campus, that type of thing, to see if somebody else has already, you know, or different people have resolved this in different ways.
I was told there was a law in the state of California that would encourage you to do that.
So just to be clear, I'm gonna,
I think part of this discussion needs to involve all the reasons why we have to have a positive relationship with law enforcement. I haven't heard any of that. So there's any number of reasons, you know, it could be anything from enforcing a restraining order against a parent or other person. It could be a 5150 where there's a mental health crisis. The sheriff is the agency that transports those students. We have had sheriffs deal with very difficult situations very smoothly in those types of things. It is necessary if there's a discipline issue that is above and beyond me. You know, we have to contact law enforcement. We need to have a positive relationship as an organization, and that needs to be considered in any conversations being had.
so I'm gonna go ahead and try and schedule some kind of an evening, meeting.
Thank you.
It doesn't have to be in the evening. I think if we want to get parents, you'd probably be better off right after school or something.
Oh, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna move to 8.5, and we have 3 assignment issues that we could probably deal with all at once. The first one is a 7th, 8th grade math teacher teaching under a limited assignment option. The second is a 6th grade science math teacher under a different section code with the same situation. And then the assignment of a speech language teacher under a 3rd section of education law. So I guess I would like a motion that involves all 3 of them simultaneously, unless someone feels they should be separated.
I move to approve all 3 of 8.5.
I'll second.
Remy? Okay, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any noes? Okay, we'll move on to 8.6, Resolution 2018-19. This is the annual GAN limit resolution. We have to do this annually after our business manager calculates our GAN limit. The GAN limit was established, I don't know, in the decade after Proposition 13 was established, and it was, I think, intended to put limits on public expenditures. But the way the law works at the moment is that you know, the limit has inflation aspects to it that have outstripped the actual budgets. And if a particular district were to be over their GAN limit, the state would assign them an additional part of somebody else's district. So it's really an unnecessary requirement that we do every year. But that being said, we have a resolution to, it's, you know, it starts out, whereas in November 1979, the California electorate did adopt Proposition 4, commonly known as the GAN Amendment, and then we are resolving that we had a public hearing, public notice, the calculations, and we declare that the appropriations in the previous and current fiscal years do not exceed the limitations imposed by Proposition 4. That's what we're voting on now, that declaration. So if someone would like to make the motion.
I'll motion that we approve it as written.
Okay, second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor, oh, Remy?
Aye.
Aye. Everybody else?
Aye.
Okay, that's done.
Those are some radiation going on.
8.7, so we have
Garble, consent.
3 different board policy and administrative regulations as a first reading. Interdistrict attendance, district of choice, vacations, holidays, which I think refers to classified management. And then uniform complaint procedures. I assume that the policy committee has met and discussed these? Is there anything that the committee wants to bring to our attention before we consider them?
I don't have anything.
Well, I can talk a little bit about them if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so for the interdistrict attendance, I think we should leave option 1 and option 2 as just as is on the policy, not selecting one or the other, because everything that I've read and gleaned from the CDE website is that we can do both, and that's part of what our MOU is doing. So that one was pretty simple and straightforward.
Okay.
For vacations and holidays, for classified managers, the committee did meet, and we are recommending that vacation days be lowered for 12-month employees when they're hired to 15 days per year rather than 20, and then they work up to 20 incrementally the longer they work here. But that would not affect current managers. So all current employees would keep what they were hired at. But the committee is recommending, and this is not, I don't believe it's reflected in the policy that you have in front of you, but the committee is looking at reducing the number of carryover days. And I don't know if we want to discuss that number now or to have an actual policy brought back as a first reading next time, or
Wasn't the committee make the changes and put it on the consent agenda?
consent? Okay,
For next time?
all right.
Did you want to say anything about the uniform?
Yeah, the
complaint procedure?
UCP, the Uniform Complaint Procedures, there are a lot of updates. Susan went through this with a fine-tooth comb, and a lot of them are just reflecting new laws that were passed regarding immigration status as a prohibited basis for discrimination, authorizes the UCP for alleged noncompliance for, well, that has to do with military families. We don't deal with that very often, but any individual, public agency, or organization may file a complaint alleging violation of law regarding state or federal programs, deletes references to the Office of Civil Rights and sexual violence, which have been withdrawn. So there's just, every year we are asked to look through to update our UCP, because this is a policy that changes a lot based on laws that are passed. So this has all of the reflected changes in it.
Okay, so we're looking to approve these as a first reading. They all come back next time for final approval, and you'll be making the changes to Board Policy 4362.
Yep.
They're coming back for approval as part of all of them are going to be in consent agenda? Okay, so
That's a process.
not just the one, okay.
Yeah.
So I'll move to have these.
What?
Is this a motion, or are we just?
I'm asking you, you
Okay,
gonna make a
I shall
motion?
make that motion, that they will be presented next meeting for a vote on the consent agenda.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Remy?
Aye.
Everybody else, aye?
All right.
No nays, okay. And then we have 8.8, a board policy on bullying, and we have a new text to that just wasn't part of the packet, but Jason distributed.
And once again, this has to do with new requirements. It says that the districts now must educate students as appropriate about the negative impact of bullying based on actual or perceived immigration status. That's included now, and districts are now required to train staff to have specific skills related to bullying prevention and response, and it's just more detailed, but mainly has to do with that immigration status.
So, would you say that we have more bullying than we did 2 years ago? Or are we improving in that area, or is it as bad as it was? Or?
I would ask that question possibly differently. Do we have a way of quantifying and assessing that behavior on campus?
I think before you guys answer, can I just say, I think that what has improved drastically is are the procedures and the teaching, the explicit way we teach kids what to do in case you do feel bullied.
Mhm.
So, I'll let these guys talk a little bit more about that, or about the actual bullying, but, or answer your question. But I think that over the years, our practices of, hey, if you're feeling like this is what you do, this is who you talk to, this is the procedures you take. So I think that's really, really good. I think we teach our students really well as far as that goes. But
as far as better or worse, it's hard to tell. And from my 6 years here, it kind of goes up and down depending on the school year and the makeup of the kids. It's not something that I track explicitly, and also one of the things that is difficult is the reports that go unreported. The incidents that go unreported that we don't know. I don't know the way to track that. But I agree with Jason that we are getting better at talking to kids about how to proceed if you do feel like you've been bullied or you're having social conflict with a student, and how we're dealing with that and pulling out with that has gotten better.
That's one of the indicators and questions on the Healthy Kids Survey, so you can look at Healthy Kids Survey data, and we'll be doing that again this year, so we could check it out. Anecdotally, I feel like at the high school, since we have so many new students, that there is an adjustment period there where, so often our kids have been friends since they were babies, and so a lot of those issues don't happen, which is great. But having a bunch of people trying to find their way creates a little more social conflict than we're used to.
I know the Healthy Kids Survey, which we do every other year, I looked at the raw data from 2 years ago, and it's pretty bizarre. There's some of those questions, if you took the answers seriously, you would run scared. And I don't think, sometimes I think the answers to those questions aren't always honest, or maybe that's not the right word, maybe honest isn't the word, but it's almost like acting out through a survey, and they were probably worse at the 5th grade level than they were at the 10th grade level.
Yeah, it's 9th and 11th that they take the Healthy Kids.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes and no. Sure you could argue that. Same with state tests. How seriously are they taking it? But it still kind of gives you a feel. And I think there's enough anecdotal and supporting evidence to back up some of those seemingly crazy numbers that are 3 times higher than the state average, or double the neighboring schools. That there's some truth to some of those numbers. So I don't see huge discrepancies, and I think hopefully when we do it this year, if you look at every year, there's trends, and I think there's some value to it. So.
Well, I know that one of the things that concerns me, and it ties into what Mark's line of questions were as well, is that so much of it depends on a cohort. Every class is different, every age group is different, it's impacted as students come in and out. But it seems to me that when we've reacted well to a bullying situation and calmed it down, are we actually seeing how that class 4 years later is it still, I want to use the word, mellowed out, or is it resurfaced? Did we only temporarily educate about the negativity involved in some of those behaviors?
You generally see that there's more, that it decreases like from 9th grade to 11th grade, which kind of makes sense because they're going from kind of being the bottom of the totem, pecking order to higher up, and they're going to have more confidence, and so there are trends like that and you can also look at the state data and see, okay, there you're going to get a more accurate vision of trends and compare and see, are we seeing that same thing? I'd like to think some of the positive indicators on those surveys are reflective of hard work we've been doing too.
Oh, for sure, absolutely. I mean, I don't think anybody from the outside comes to our campuses and doesn't remark about how safe and supportive people, feel. But that can still sometimes mask behavior that we don't like, or needs to be improved. So it's not so much I'm comparing us to anybody else, but just trying to see, I guess bullying is just part of growing up. I mean, certainly my school experience, there were times when, you'd go home in tears because you were bullied, and then what do you do about it? You've got to change. You've got to not take it the same way. But, hopefully.
Well, we try to address the bullier. We're not going to tell someone to buck up and toughen up. We're going to address the root cause of it. So, we take it seriously, and it does happen. At the same time, we have a very supportive student body that a lot of students come to our school from other areas and find a way to fit in and be accepted. So, but it doesn't mean that these things don't happen.
Another concern I have is just that some kinds of bullying are so much more invisible than other kinds. We have this stereotypical thing about give me your lunch money. That's not what most bullying is. And a lot of bullying that we don't see happens between girls. And I know we've had teacher training in the past. I wonder if teachers currently are well trained about the different issues in different kinds of bullying and the kinds that are invisible or hard to see. That's a concern to me. And it is required in here by law that teachers be trained about all this stuff. And the other part of that that concerns me right now is I feel like there is this incredible social public pressure or experience that kids are having where there is somebody campaigning for governor threatening in a campaign ad to stomp on another candidate's face with golf spikes. That was on TV this week, and I think it affects kids, and it worries me.
You had a comment?
I said my name before, Milestone. I'm also an alumna of Mendocino. But I'm really glad to hear that there's been a lot of work going on dealing with bullying. I've had an interesting experience with my kids. My daughter's 8 now, but we lived in the Oakland Hills. She had a really great school there at Walking Miller Elementary. And they had a really amazing way to deal with bullying, and oftentimes they took both kids that were involved, or however many kids were involved, and would sit them down together in a supervised space and have them talk to each other. And that seemed to work really well there. Last year we were at Redwood, and my daughter experienced getting bullied. And I had to go in and ask them to do this for my daughter. And they did. And at the end of the year, she ended up friends with some of the people that she had issues with throughout the year. So it's almost magical how that can work, and really training our kids to be able to speak, to find the support they need first, like not necessarily speak up in an unsupervised place, but to have that support and be able to speak to each other directly. Seemed really helpful to me. I don't know what your procedures are.
It sounds like a
Speaking from my
restorative system.
experience.
Well, thank you. I think we've added the sheriff on campus to our future agenda items. Is there anything else that?
Okay, and you can say no. Part of what I realized I was talking about quite a bit when we were going through the trustee area extended debate was I realized how people are so frightened in the small schools that any given time they can close. So I would like to see if we could have an actual process that we at least look at in order to alleviate some of that anxiety. So I'm putting it out there. I'm picturing, involving before any closure of a community committee, which I know we've done, or maybe a time frame in which within a certain amount of time we don't close a school. Anyway, I just think it's worth having a bit of a process that we can follow and people don't feel it's just haphazard in any given time, they will be on the receiving end of possibly losing their community resource.
Okay. Any other suggestions for future agenda items?
I'm wondering if we could perhaps have the counselor come in and do a report on the mental health first aid training.
Sure.
I'd be really interested in that.
You can write that down.
Mm-hmm.
Susan, write that down.
All right.
And I'll state my support for following up a little more on this bullying concept. I asked Jason about it yesterday, and his answer was about like Kim and Tobin's, which are, they're at the school every day, they know what's going on, but I don't hear structure, I don't hear methods of resolution that are standardized and measured, so I'd like to continue on this line of conversation as well.
Yeah, I would just also say I feel really good about a lot of the behavioral things going on in our schools. PBIS, the fact that PBIS has been consistently implemented for a while now is incredible and wonderful, and I want to make sure that's known.
Can I just make a personal comment too?
You may.
Okay, so I've been asked this quite a bit, so I just wanted to disclose that I am running for another board. I'm running for the hospital board, and I'm in no way thinking of leaving this board. I'm very committed to continuing and doing what I can for the district, and I really enjoy this position. So it's not going, there's no conflict. I did check that, so I just wanted to say that it in no way means I'll be leaving the school district board.
Okay. All right. With that, we're adjourned.